Hi everyone! Today we are doing a lesson on the Introduction to a Biology unit, and specifically we're looking at cells, tissues, organs, and systems of living things, so how all of those organs interact. We're going to start with a couple of cell curiosities. So you probably know by now that organisms are made up of one or more cells. Now cells we usually think of as being little tiny things that you can only see under a microscope. However, that's not always the case. Here are some interesting cell curiosities. Your body is made up of about 70 trillion cells, and the longest cells in your body are nerve cells. Nerve cells can actually be over a meter long. So you can have teeny tiny cells that you can only see under a microscope, but you also have cells in your body that are a meter long. The longest nerve cells of any species are found in the colossal squid, where some nerve cells can be 10 meters in length. Here's a picture of the colossal squid. Now, organisms can also be made up of just one cell. Here are two examples on this page, both of which are algae. The first one is called Caulerpa, probably pronouncing that one wrong. It's a single cell, but it has multiple nuclei. They can be 6 to 12 inches long. The one at the bottom is kind of cute looking, Valonia ventricosa, another single-celled algae. When there's only one cell that an organism is made of, it's called unicellular. And those cells can be up to 4 centimeters long. Again, multiple nuclei, but just one cell. In case you were wondering, an egg, like a chicken egg or a bird egg or a reptile egg, is not in fact one cell. It's made up of many cells. Now, our bodies are obviously made up of 70 trillion cells. They come in all different shapes and sizes, and their structure actually reflects their job, what their function is within our bodies. All of these different cells are located in all of our different organs. All of our different organs, do they cooperate? Do they work together? Obviously, yes. Otherwise, we wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be alive. So all of these organs in our body have to work together to produce a functioning organism. And that's one of the main things we're going to focus on this unit. Body systems are interconnected. So for example, we all know about the digestive system and the circulatory system. The digestive system is responsible for organisms ingesting food, breaking down that food, getting nutrients and water from the food, and then getting rid of the waste products. That's the function of the digestive system, whereas the function of the circulatory system is to transport nutrients and other kinds of molecules to different cells all over your body. Now, these two systems interact in a really important way. For example, the blood will actually take nutrients, special biological molecules that your digestive system has broken down, take them into the bloodstream and transport them to areas of the body where they're needed. They also take waste products from cells in different parts of your body, transport them back to your digestive system so that your digestive system can get rid of it. This is a very common diagram you're going to see all unit. This shows the hierarchy of organization within an organism. So the most basic unit of life within an organism is a single cell. Now you can have a whole bunch of cells that are identical working together. They make up something called a tissue. You can have different types of tissues working together for one purpose, and they make up something called an organ. Multiple organs working together for the same basic purpose make up a system, and different organ systems within an organism make up the entire organism. Let's look at a specific example. Let's look at one single stomach cell. Now, your stomach is a pretty complex organ with lots of different tissues, different types of cells that make it up. Let's look at one specific cell in your stomach, and that's a single muscle cell. So we can start with the most basic organization of an organism. One single muscle cell located in your stomach. All of those muscle cells are grouped together. They make up stomach muscle tissue. Those stomach muscle tissues have a very important role in the function of the stomach, but they're not the only types of tissues that exist in the stomach as an organ. There's also connective tissues. There's also blood cells. There's also columnar epithelium. That just means a type of layer on the lining of the stomach. You also have nerve cells, nerve tissues. All of these different tissues make up the stomach. Now, the stomach is not the only organ in our digestive system. The stomach works with the liver, works with the small intestine, works with the large intestine, and others to make up the entire digestive system. So there we have the entire hierarchy of organization in an organism. Here's another example with the same grouping of cells. In fact, it's the same example of the organ, the stomach. In this case, it's a tiger. We have a single smooth muscle cell, a whole bunch of muscle cells working together to make up muscle tissue. That muscle tissue is just one type of tissue that makes up the stomach. The stomach is just one organ that makes up the digestive system. And the digestive system is just one system that allows an entire organism to function. Now, animals aren't the only organisms that have differentiated tissues, different cells serving different purposes. Plants also have differentiated tissues. The cells in a plant are varied. Those cells are grouped together to form tissues, which are grouped together to form organs. So yes, plants have organs. Some of those organs include the leaf, the stem, the root, and every organ is made up of different tissues. Here are some examples, little cross sections and microscopic images of cells that make up a plant. One interesting exception is fungus. A fungus is actually made up of only one type of cell repeated over and over and over. So there's only one type of tissue. There are no differentiated tissue in a fungus. Now, organisms don't have to be made of different cells. They don't even have to be made of multiple cells. In the example from the beginning of the note, you can have an organism made up of only one cell. For example, amoebas are single-celled, bacteria are single-celled, and some seaweeds are single-celled. Here's an example of an animal cell. You may remember pictures like this from middle school when you learned about the organelles within a cell. Here's a microscopic slide that shows a whole bunch of cells all smushed together. And here's an example of an animal cell. Notice how the cell membrane groups all of these organelles together. Not all animal cells have a tail called a flagellum. They'll only have that if that particular cell has to move. But some of the organelles you'll probably recognize, things like the nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum, lysosomes, and of course, the mitochondria. Cytology is a word that just means the study of cells. The first observed cell was in 1665 by an English scientist named Robert Hooke. He actually looked at a slice of cork. Cork is just a dried plant. So when he was actually looking at cells for the first time through a microscope, he was looking at a dead cell. He looked at the images through his microscope, which are shown here, and he described what he saw as little tiny rooms. Cellula means small room. Eventually, this led to the first cell theory. The original cell theory states, all living organisms are composed of one or more cells. The cell is the basic unit of life, and cells arise from pre-existing cells. That last one seems obvious to us, but it was not obvious to people at the time, and lots of experimentation was required before they could actually tell where cells came from. One interesting exception to cell theory, and one that is coming up in the news quite a lot lately, are viruses. Some people may consider viruses alive, but they're actually not made of cells. Viruses have many features of life, but by the cell theory, they're not actually cells, and here's why. They can't reproduce on their own. They have to hijack the reproductive abilities of an organism cell in order to reproduce. They have no metabolism, so they can't produce waste products. They can't undergo cellular respiration. And finally, they don't grow. So they're basically some sort of RNA or DNA wrapped in a fat membrane, a lipid membrane, and they can just hijack the machinery of cells from an organism. Now, the cell theory has been updated for modern times to include the following 3 points. Point number 4, cells contain hereditary information, which is passed from cell to cell during cell division. 5, all cells are basically the same in chemical composition, which means if you zoom in to any organelle in a cell, it's made of basically the same molecules. And finally, 6, all energy flow of life occurs within cells. That includes metabolism and all biochemistry.